On this week's episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds, we're joined by Bob Rafei of Big Red Button Entertainment and Naughty Dog fame. We discuss crafting memorable worlds, developing game tutorials, the challenges of seeking investors, and more. Let's jump into it. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Hero Time Manufacturing. That is Hero Time, the numeral1.com. Coach Gleck has been a regular on our podcast. We highly recommend his services. He is a man of integrity. Hero Time, they can make anything. They've got competitive pricing and they even do game prototypes. So make sure to check out Hero Time, numeral1.com. A link is in the show notes. And if you use the code Crowdfunding Nerds 101, you can get a 3% discount on your production through them. Let's get back into the episode.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his marketing level?
It's over 9,000!
What, 9,000? I must be using Crowdfunding Nerds.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I'm joined as always by Sean. And today we have a really excellent and awesome guest. We have Bob Rafei. He's the creative director of Big Red Button Entertainment and the former art director of Naughty Dog. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me, Sean. It's a pleasure, and I'm honored to be here. I wasn't expecting to be a guest on such an awesome podcast, and I'm happy to have joined.
Well, you know, we like to reach down and pick up the small people every so often, you know.
I appreciate it. And the small people, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it was cool because Sean originally he loves, you know, all the Naughty Dog IPs, the Jak and Daxter universe. He's always talking about that. And he just spontaneously reached out. Right. And then turns out there was another human at the other end. And
that's
here we are.
Yeah, when it comes to Naughty Dog, I think there's sort of two fans. Ones who sort of were quite committed to the stretch and pull animation style that they're sort of were known for, and then they sort of changed direction. So I'm part of of that sort of category of Naughty Dog fan, where I very much enjoyed the kind of Crash Bandicoot series and
appreciate it. Yeah,
Jak
we can
and
talk
Daxter.
for a full podcast about that transition because that was a really tough time at Naughty Dog, and it was a cultural change, and for myself as well. But I think you probably want an introduction first, before I get into it.
Yeah, I would love to, for the benefit of our listeners, just share who it is that, you know, where you came from, what have you done in the gaming industry, and what are you doing now?
Yeah. So I'm Bob Rafei. I'm the founder and creative director of my current company, Big Red Button Entertainment. You can find us on brbent.com. For some of the work that we've done. And also my personal website is bobrafei.com. So you can go check that out, Sean and Andrew, right now, if you want to kind of sketch out, see if there's anything that sparks kind of interest about what we've done. But for the most part, I've been making games for about, 30 years. I'm sorry to age myself. I kind of was at the right place at the right time and became my first employee at Naughty Dog. And that was a wild ride where it was the beginning of what became a Crash Bandicoot for the fledgling at the time PlayStation 1. And we just kind of were one of those things with the lightning in a bottle. We were at the right place at the right time. Great bunch of guys that came together. Founders Jason and Andy, with Dave Baggett, Taylor Kurosaki, and just a bunch of other people that were just a passion project that became Crash Bandicoot. And it was simply, there's plenty of lore out there, so you can probably search it for yourself in terms of how Naughty Dog got off the ground. But we're basically trying to make the first kind of platformer and chasing Mario, which is a very tall order to follow. And I just kind of fell in love with original concept development. I actually wasn't supposed to be in games in the first place. I went to art school in New York City, Parsons School of Design. So I was a traditional illustrator. I wanted to get into visual effects. So, it was Jurassic Park and Star Wars, and a bunch of other IP that I'm sure we're going to talk about that kind of fueled my interest. And I was purely looking to join something that was cool in that way, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, where I actually was going to take a position at Crystal Dynamics and maybe Capcom. I was interviewing in other places, and I just happened to luck out that the recruiter for Naughty Dog, who was just the two guys, Jason and Andy, just getting their contract with Universal Studios, who was getting into game space at the time, were looking to expand. And because of my traditional background, this is a time when concept art was not a thing in video games. It was a pixel art, and actually most of the people that I worked at another 8-bit studio that was doing the biggest licensing at the time. None of the people there were traditional artists. Actually, at that company, I was the first one to have the traditional background and be like a traditional painter and so on. So having a concept artist was a very unusual thing, and now it's you can't do a game without it. So I fell in love with original IP development, which was at the time, Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter, and then we shifted over to Uncharted, where we had a studio leadership change. Jason and Andy had fulfilled their obligation to the acquisition of Sony, and they were gone. So the rest of us were trying to figure out how do we fill this leadership vacuum, and that became the very struggle that was Uncharted. But obviously, it set Naughty Dog up in its current trajectory, which is amazing to do incredibly photoreal and actually very violent games right now. But the underlying core of Naughty Dog has always been to develop really strong visuals, to have organic environments. You kind of see that as a theme, and I wanted to recreate that very naively. You as an entrepreneur, you got to be pretty stupid to be an entrepreneur and pretty cocky because 70% of startups fail, and so there's a lot of headwinds for starting your own studio, especially in games, which is you're making digital content, you're making software that's for entertainment. If it was like doing some sort of app functionality, that's one thing, but to actually entertain people, you're just stupid to start your own studio. I'm being a little facetious about it, but it was a very tough road, and I'm happy to say that we're still here, and I'll tell you how we survived. But because of my love for original IP development, that's really was the foundation of a very hard choice of leaving Naughty Dog after, it was like 13 years of really amazing work. There was other factors to the decision, having a new family, wanting to try something that was always in the back of my head for some concept development and so on into games. So that was really my background, and gosh, I guess I can pull on any of those threads if you want.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show. Yeah, the first thread I'd like to pull on is the way that I've heard it described is when you decide to start your own business. Everybody listening to this is either started their own business or is aiming to with a Kickstarter campaign of some kind, or maybe they've crowdfunded and they're doing projects that way. We have people launching games on Steam and other things like that, but generally a bunch of indies who were afflicted with the disease of entrepreneurism, and they started a business, and at a certain point it's like the disease leaves your body and you're stuck with a small business that you're like, well, what do I do now? I need to survive. And the feels like push comes to shove in a place like that, a lot of people can't make it or don't make it, don't do what it takes, or let's talk about that for you.
There's a lot of factors that goes into that decision. First of all, the biggest one is your financial risk tolerance. How long can you go without a paycheck? Do you have to support a family? And then eventually it's like, how long can you support a team? Like if you're lucky enough to get a project, then get some funding coming in, and it could be, most likely, if you're lucky, it's actually your project, but it could be just to survive, could be work for hire. You have to be very honest with yourself in terms of what kind of lifestyle are you accustomed to. Can you work 16-hour days if you have to without pay, potentially? Because I foolishly did. That was actually one of my biggest mistakes, was for the majority of the term of the company, I did not pay myself, which I think turned out to be a big mistake, because it was always, we're going to put every single dollar back into our prototypes, and you got to be careful about that. Kind of can lead to a lot of burnout, not only financially, but emotionally, so you got to be ready for that, and you got to have like a hard line.
Oh, that's a great thing to drill deeper into. Can
Sure.
we drill deeper into that? Because a lot of people listening to this, that launch their first project, they just want to see it enter into the world. And when I
Yeah.
ask, when I interview our clients, or when I talk to people, that's one of the biggest motivating factors for them, is they just want to see the thing that they've
Sure.
been dreaming about
Absolutely.
enter into the world and people
And that's why
experience
you
it.
get
But
into
then,
this business. You don't get into this business because you want to get into hiring and firing. You don't want to get into reading contracts. You don't want to get into because you have to go to trade shows and soul sucking experience of hearing no 99% of the time. But those are the things that actually are the actual reality of a startup, and not the other side, which is in your head, which is, I'm going to make this amazing product. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. People are going to love it. It's going to launch and it's going to be awesome. That could be the case, but chances are there's going to be a lot of headwinds. There's going to be a lot of resistance. Well, first of all, look at the landscape of what are you trying to do? If you're inspired by your favorite game and you try to do that game, chances are that's not good enough. A lot of times, I've done thousands of pitches at this point, and it's always what is the unique selling point? How is it going to stand on the market? And can you do it for $5? It's like contradictory messages from publishers in terms of, you don't know how many times I've been told, I can't wait to play this game, but we can't afford this, or it's not our genre, or it's the crowded market, or and you have to be willing, if you really are passionate about your vision, and if you truly think you have something different, and that's the case, is that how is it going to stand apart in the genre that you love? It's not good enough just to emulate your inspiration, something that inspired you. That's awesome. That's going to get you to understand. And it's important to really delve down into your genre to understand what's the do's and don'ts of it. But you also need to have an advantage. And that's what publishers and investors look for. First of all, it's a team. Who is your team? Are you complementary team? Do you have somebody who is just an art nerd and a video game and a design nerd and a programming nerd, and then you need someone who's external, right? That was my biggest mistakes, is that I wore too many hats. And it's still apparent in my title: CEO, creative director, and founder. Okay, those are, ultimately you need somebody who is going out there to trade shows and is able to pitch your game with passion and conviction, is able to talk numbers. And at this point, outsourcing is so important, right? So, gosh, there's so many things to talk about. So with COVID, we gave up our studio. Now we're doing fine, being remote, but that really changed the game. And now there's so many great studios that you can partner up with. If you're in North America, your standard of living, your cost of living is super expensive. So that means that you have to be able to figure out how to pay rent and at the same time work on your passion project, right? So having an external team is helpful, but you do lose the chemistry of that day-to-day conversation, those lunchtime conversations, those let's coffee walks that we used to have at 4:00, which I still do, just go downstairs and refill my tea and so on. So those are the chemistry things that you lose by working globally. But it's a very fickle market. It's a very crowded market. And I hate to paint such a, sobering reality, but it's been a really, really tough road. And sometimes I ask myself, was I smart to even start this? And I guess there's multiple sides of it. On the one hand, I'm glad I did, because I might have gone to my grave. And I've had people tell me this who've worked at successful studios and companies, and they always wanted to strike on their own, but they never did, and they regretted it. And regret is one of the hardest things to live with. So at least I know that I gave it my best shot, and we're still surviving. Not to the vision that I would want, certainly. I set out to make another Naughty Dog, and I have we peaked at 150 people on a Sega project, which was tremendous. And then having to lay off most of them is such a soul crushing experience, because it's so difficult to feed a beast of if your burn rate is $1 million a month, how the hell are you going to maintain that? And then you're only as good as your last product, which the Sonic project we can talk about. It was a ambitious cinematic title that Sega wanted to make, but we were given a death march because it became a Wii U exclusive. And ultimately, it just was panned in the press because it was rushed and everything else. But and nobody cares. Nobody cares because we worked all night. We had so many all-nighters. We went to hell and back to actually get the game done because we were supposed to be on multiple consoles and became a Wii exclusive with the deal that Sega and Nintendo had. As soon as it was announced, I got hate mail because you ruined my childhood because we significantly changed Sonic because we were trying to make it more cinematic and we looked into all this backstory about what is Sonic's background, and consistently we were hitting our heads against the wall with that because Sega Japan ultimately did not want Sonic to be anything beyond a character that quote unquote eats chili dogs on the beach. So and I was like, oh, okay. So if I'd known that, had I known that really it was a battle between Sega America and Sega Japan ultimately, and I was stuck in the middle, I would potentially not have taken that title. I mean, you can see some of the 500 pages of style guide that has shows about 5,000 pieces of artwork on my website. And in terms of what we did for that series. And that was a soul-crushing experience to ultimately ship it. But then instead of celebrating, it's like, good luck trying to get another title. So I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent, but
no, it's interesting. In fact, I was it reminds me of something that I read this week about the history of Pokemon, the trading card game.
Yeah.
How it was originally licensed to Wizards of the Coast, I want to say, to print, and I could be wrong. I might be mixing up companies here, but it was originally licensed to them to print, and they wanted just like Magic because they were making Magic and printing Magic cards. And their job was to print it exactly as it was written, not change any of the art, not change any of the design. But with Magic the Gathering, which is the biggest trading card game right now, they're like, we can improve the game design. Like the game design kind of sucks. Like early on in Pokemon, it was really not a very good game, very imbalanced. And there was this battle that was happening between two studios, and they eventually lost the rights because the Pokemon company didn't, which I think was under Nintendo at the time, or maybe still is, but the Pokemon company was like, no, we our market is to children. We don't care about balance or competitiveness. We care about maintaining the IP in a way that is consistent with the show. You want to collect the cards. You don't want to have this competitive games that adults play. That's not our focus. So they rejected the idea, which, I think, they're doing fine. But,
they are. And funny enough, we did actually work with Niantic to create Pokemon Go as well. So that was a massive title that we didn't, it was just mind blowing to see it come out that summer of, gosh, what was it, like 2014 or whatever it was. And it was just everywhere. It was just like, what is happening? This is like this product that we helped create is just like, it was on fire. You never can tell like what game is going to strike. And that's I think when I read Good to Great, the book about how companies come about, there was like 3 factors that was pointed out. Basically, you have you have talent, right? It was like the example of Beatles and Bill Gates. You have the talent. You have the hard work. That's what the author had looked at all these companies and also companies that fail. And the third factor, which nobody wants to hear, was luck for all these companies being at the right place at the right time. For example, it was Bill Gates. Obviously, was a talented guy, very smart programmer. But for whatever reason, the private school that he was in, first of all, private school, there you go. The private school that he was in had a mainframe that was sitting there, and so he started just coding for it, and that just was like a rare thing that was able to get him, an advantage like that. So, unfortunately, that's the part that when you talk about entrepreneurship, there's a lot of luck factor. You got to roll that dice. You got to roll 20, man, or else you're screwed. So that's the thing, being at the right place at the right time. And actually, that was my thing too. I was at the right place at the right time to join Naughty Dog. This little company that I thought was going to fail. It was going to bring me to Los Angeles, where I could easily join other visual effects companies. But then it was just like every product, every game was amazing, and it was just like, oh my god, like let's do something better and cool. And I also, one of the things that I'm an art geek at best. Like I need a good designer to tell me just to shut up. Let's talk about proper game design instead of like cool visuals. So the art of creating games is what I love. the creation of something from nothing, creating on 2D as a paper, and then eventually 3D character, eventually see it move, and then all the world, and then all the functionality. That the process of actually creation to me is far more rewarding than the final product. So that's why I love doing what I do.
I'd love to tap into that because I think one thing that is very clear is that games that you've helped produce are very memorable. I don't know if that's just because they have a significance in my childhood, but it seems that even today people are still talking about Crash Bandicoot. There's a thriving Jak and Daxter community. I don't know if you know about the Open Goal, where basically the fans have come together and basically backwards engineered the programming language and have created. They started to mod Jak and Daxter, which is pretty impressive, and it's probably deeply illegal and it might get shut down at some stage. But it nevertheless, it shows that these IPs that you help create are still very much in the minds of people. They still love thinking about these worlds. So maybe you could kind of pull the screen back a bit. Tell us a little bit about your process. What inspires you? How do you develop these interesting characters, interesting worlds, landscapes, and just a little bit behind the scenes?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways to do it. In general, one of your questions prior to the podcast was to ask me about the creative process, and I thought about it, and there's two approaches: the art specific approach and a design specific approach, and a lot of times there's the hybrids of the two. So the art specific is when you actually cater to the visuals of the world first, in terms of the aesthetics and the what is the visual identity of the world, and it's you generate a strong visual through the making landmarks and the atmosphere of the game, and then the other one is whether you actually have the mechanics in mind that comes afterwards. So there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, but really, what you're, I think, asking for is, what are some of the things that we think about when we are creating a game? First of all, you have to have a creative North Star. You have to define what the core fantasy is. So, for example, Last of Us is survival, right? Cyberpunk is rebellion. Zelda is a wondrous world, right? And you have to really focus on how did you develop that and you protect that from well-meaning feature creep, which just happens all the time. So you have to be true to the core of the concept. You have to think about developing your world builders early. You have to have a narrative lead. You have to have an art director. You have to have a level designer who always are working together to define what is for a pre-production to be really robust. It would have to have its core pillars identified, right? And but allow room for some discovery as well. The world has to feel lived in. So you have to have, you think about what's underneath the surface in terms of how did this world come about? What is the culture of this world? Is it self-contained? Does the rules make sense? Again, just because Last of Us is on my mind, it's post-apocalyptic. In the TV show, they actually go into how the infection came about, but not the game. The game is all about how do I actually live another day by brutally surviving and doing what I have to do, and ultimately what sets that zombie game apart. Because if you actually look at Last of Us as an example, if you were to pitch that today, it would not get picked up because it's a post-apocalyptic zombie game. It's like, okay, so what? But it's really about this man's quest to become human again and become a father again, to rediscover his protective nurturing quality and what Ellie brings out of Joel, right? So Joel will destroy the world if he has to in order to save Ellie because she rekindled in him, so that's the core premise of that game. And you have to be able to protect that. It would be so easy to be in the crunches of being in trenches of production, and you're missing your deadlines or whatever, and be like, could we just cut out that scene where she talks about his watch? Could we just don't have the budget and time for it? And it just becomes another zombie game where you got to either run and gun or stealth, and so it's very difficult to kind of maintain the core premise and guard it. Other things that you have to think about is you have to anchor the player's identity in terms of what is some of the not visually, as in terms of like where are they, right? So physically in the world, and who the character is trying to do, is trying to achieve. And in terms of where are they in the world, the geography of it is very important. Like this is something that was always part of the conversation. Naughty Dog is the term weenies came from Disney theme park design, where you would have to have like the towers that are organizing the various locations of the park. Same thing with environment design. It's important to have that tower or like the goal that you're trying to get to, and that's why in a lot of Naughty Dog games there's there's a tower literally, or there's like the building, there's like the thing that you're trying to get to, and that's because that kind of grounds the player. And when you're always confused about where you have to go, you look up, you're like, oh, I got to go north, I got to go east, I got to go west. And it's also important to identify that the characters. I think it's called ludonarrative dissonance in terms of if the character is a brutal killer, but then he has a sentimental, an introspection about killing, then that's an interesting disconnect between what the player wants and what the character wants, right? So those are the two different things that you have to guard against. And in terms of world design, um, uh, it's having a holistic approach, right? What is the weather of the location? What is the soundscape? What is the politics of the world? So if you are able to kind of identify something that makes sense to the user, then I think those worlds become far more memorable, and they start to write themselves to some degree. That's why you have the best IPs have fan fiction, because you start to fill out the world for yourself, right? And that's what great worlds do. And I guarantee that most of the developers and the creators behind that just give you the canvas, but they don't necessarily pinpoint every single thing. Somebody like Crazy as Tolkien might, but for the most part, great worlds kind of build themselves. And because we all have our stories to tell, and we're able to kind of fill out the environment for ourselves, that's why people cosplay. That's why people like have the fan fictions, because they kind of identify with the world, and they think about, well, how would that, how would this story be slightly different, or what would you have to do if you're not like if it's not the hero's journey? What is like the NPC's journey, right? How does the NPC get impacted by the hero going through and either destroying the world because they're trying to get to their point, or helping it? So those kind of things really inspire the world by itself. Sorry about that ramble, by the way.
I
No,
love
it's
every
all
word.
good.
It's ludonarrative dissonance. We're talking about ludo is game, narrative is narration, dissonance is difference of position or something that is not that doesn't sound good, or or doesn't feel good.
Right.
And so what we're talking about is if I, as the player, game mechanics wise, I want to kill stuff, and I just want to whoop stuff and get like, oh, I found like in I don't know, Resident Evil, you want to slay zombies and find that magazine on the clip on the ground, or you got a knife now, or whatever, and so you're just blasting zombies left, right, and center. And then some dissonance would be if I wanted to kill stuff, and like you had used the example of a character like kind of agonizing over killing things. That generally is contrary to what the player is incentivized to do, because you have to kill stuff in order to get loot, in order to build yourself or whatever. And it probably kind of makes the player feel terrible for doing the things that, is that kind of what you're talking about as something to avoid?
The challenge of games is that, because the characters have to be kind of singular minded, it makes the characters feel a little two-dimensional, because of games are basically the verb is, what's my verb, right? So if it's killing, if it's hiding, if it's fighting, and if you go against that to some degree, there's got to be a good reason as to why you're kind of going against the flavor of it. That's why it's a lot easier, or the medium for film and TV, because it's a sit back element. Like you're disconnected from the character, but in a video game you're sitting forward, you're connected to the character. So therefore, the actions that you do drive the agency of the character. So if their objectives are in conflict, then that causes some confusion for the player, or potentially bad feelings about the game, right? So that's why, because it's for film and TV, it's a sit back experience. You fall into empathy for the character, but you have no control what's happening, right? You have to basically just go along for the ride. and therefore it's a lot more manipulative in terms of the nuance of characters, conflict of interest, and those are actually the kind of things that you need for good storytelling, right? How does the character come up against an action, and that defines who their characters are, and that's what Robert McKee says on his whole story premise, is that when a character comes across an act, what his true response is makes us understand who his true character is. Is he a villain? Is he a hero? Is he altruistic? Is he selfish? That's a lot more harder to do in a game, right? Because in a game, you're trying to achieve the verb, to loot, to gain, to fight, to win, to kill, to climb. So, in a platforming game, you better give me some platforms. If you just have me just hang out, that's not going to make a good game, right? So that's why it's very difficult to make these characters feel more three-dimensional and like nuanced. And that's why, from the outside's perspective, there's always been this hostility. I don't think anymore about video games being violent, because it's a lot easier to do a headshot than think about, like, what is the ramifications of my headshot, right? Like in Saving Private Ryan, you look at ramifications of letting one person go and how that impacts the end of story. But you don't think about that in the game. You just basically kill the guy and take his loot because you need the loot. That's the only way the game set it up for you. If it was set up to let the guy go and there's a reason for that, then maybe, yeah. And I think those games are because of the. Gosh, I'm sorry to ramble on all these so many subjects. It's such an interesting conversation.
In fact, actually, I always think about Fable. The end of Fable, the very first Fable. You've got like the bad guy cornered, and he's talking to you and whatever. And when I played through Fable, I maxed my character out. I was like, ridiculously strong. And then I'm looking forward to this last boss fight where there's this epic encounter. I don't know, maybe the guy summons a dragon out of the sky or whatever. I'm not sure. And they get there, and then at the very end, he's like monologuing, and I hit him when he like in the middle of his monologue, and he just dies and like falls down this hill, and I'm like, wait, or this this chasm. Was that it? That was stupid. That was the dumbest ending of any game I've ever played. Was that it was so anticlimactic. He was talking, I just pressed X or whatever, and then I slash him, and he's like, ugh, and falls over. It's like, well. But I kind of wanted to hear what he had to say.
But you remember that ending. See, that's the thing. Okay, I did not play Fable, but that makes me want to play it now, because I think they were it's a smart team that was making that game, and they were going against the grain of what Game Hero is doing. And I think to some degree the same thing with Naughty Dog, with what they did with what Neil was trying to do with Last of Us. The game is setting you up for this epic boss fight, and that's what the language of the genre is, right? And they said, what if we flip it on its head? But the fact is, like, would you have remembered this epic boss fight more, or the fact that this was such a anticlimactic ending? Like, okay, that was unexpected. But that's our job, right? Yeah, it was different. Our job is to make sure that it's memorable, and sometimes those choices don't land, and nobody knows this. And that's the shitty thing, is that when you go to pitch your game at trade shows and publishers, they got like 50 minutes to look at your game, and you have to give the pitch and the elevator pitch and everything. But nobody knows how it's going to land. And so it's just like they have to look at all this data and give you a review. And that's why they have to turn it down, most likely, because they have to be incredibly risk adverse. And that means that ultimately they make really safe games, and then they wonder why they don't sell well, because it's rolling the dice. It's really just like it's really your creative vision and the execution of it that makes it successful.
So, Bob, in the terms of world building, you evoked the name of Tolkien. So I'd like to kind of go back there for a second. I know on your website you have artwork that you've done at different stages of your life. And around the ages of 23, 24, you sort of showcase a lot of art that seems to be inspired by higher fantasy. And I'm just curious to know, did Lord of the Rings or Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing games ever have an impact in your sort of ideas of world building?
200%. You nailed it. I mean, when I was growing up, D&D was the social multiplayer activity. This is, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm kind of, aging myself. But this was pre-internet. This is pre-cell phones. So our gaming experience was to get together, and later years, to pass around something to help your imagination. And basically, it was the connection to the friends. The silly activities that you would do together, and trying to figure out how the hell am I going to, get past this creature or this puzzle in the game. But also it fueled my imagination. I was an avid reader. I had to commute to my school from New Jersey, so to New York. So I had a 45-minute to an hour a ride. So a lot of times I would just read a lot of fiction, right? It would be reading D&D books, reading sci-fi, reading Tolkien, which was hard to read. So it was a slog. But that's all my friends and I, my dorky friends and I talked about was the various books that we were reading, the comic books that we were consuming. And then I started looking at the book covers. And I was thinking, that I could paint something like that, and I would like to paint something like that. And that's why you have like the master studies in my website is what led me to see that, oh my God, I actually can do this. Even like in art class, like my copies of the book covers that I was doing was turning out to be better than the other guys, and I started realizing that I actually might have a talent here. So that led me to go to art school. And the thing that was amazing for me was when we had a trip. Well, my friends and I had a trip to California, and I actually was using the visual effects books to the magazines to try to find connections to visual effects companies out in Los Angeles. And I went to see this company. I don't think they were around anymore. I think they were called Forward Productions that did the sequence for Terminator 2, where Sarah Connors has the vision of Los Angeles blowing up with a nuclear weapon as she's looking over the playground and of her kid and everything, or the life that she could have versus the life that's coming. And there was a painting laying in the wall of the studio that was this, like, I don't know, like 4 foot by like 3 foot painting of the Los Angeles. It was the background for that plate. And I was like, oh my God, somebody painted that? Like, you don't have to paint like ridiculous themes of like, Pollyanna, like roses are red. Like, you can actually paint destruction. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's me. I want to paint shit like that. So, and that led to one thing, and just like fantasy, emulating fantasy covers and just painting in general, and just being able to create these worlds. And then that was like the spark of like the CG coming in to its own, and that was it. And I was just like caught the fire, and I couldn't go back anymore.
That's amazing. I find that emulation is really kind of the first step in being
Absolutely.
innovative,
That's
right?
true.
Like you
Yes.
kind of, I find so many people, even people listening to this, they may be like, well, I'm kind of making a better version of a game that I really like. It's like,
Mhm.
I wish Catan had, I don't know, space wizards.
Yeah.
And so how can I make Catan with space wizards? Instead of sheep, we're going to
Yeah.
be like, it's a cow, and the cow, when I give it to you, it's sapped up by aliens or whatever, and maybe
Right.
it's not that good at the end of the day. You could probably still find 300 backers for that on Kickstarter,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be something maybe that carries and is like an evergreen title for you and all of that. But
Yeah.
just that work and like that grind will, like, you pick up so much. You're like, well, now here's what I really want to do. And
Yeah.
I think that
And that's true. And I think that's a creative journey. It's to become a artisan and master craftsman versus starting out. Like it's I have my daughter's actually about to graduate visual effects from Chapman. She was always looking over my shoulder and looking at all the cool things that I was doing, and she kind of understood from the ground up how to do things, and kind of caught the bug herself. The thing is, like, I always talk about it when I do lectures at various locations for students. Doing master studies and personal projects are the way to get off the ground, because you will learn so much to try to just do just a plain old copy of the thing that inspires you, just to get off the ground and to learn the tools, right? To do it. Eventually, you'll get to. You can't do that forever, because that doesn't expand your creativity and your knowledge base. That's a starting point to try to learn from the things that inspire you. But then once you master that, then you've kind of came into your own for understanding the tools that are at your disposal. How do you expand on that, right? Then it's time to, like you said, expand on it, to tweak it, to make it better, to make it different. To like, what if like we do this kind of thing that's more unique or different about it, or we give it some contrary kind of elements to make it more subtle in some approach, or
Yeah.
make it visually completely different, right? So you take like a super violent world and you make it stylized, right? And that becomes a whole different flavor. So those are the kind of things that you should be doing as somebody who's trying to learn their craft. And if it's writing, yeah, sure, you start writing something that's very similar to what inspired you, and you adjust it, right? You modify it. Same with music. That's how you become a better musician. Is just first start to learn to play the songs that you love, and then you eventually start to write your own music. So
Yeah.
yeah, emulation is absolutely essential for creativity and growth.
I love that. Now, I have kind of a follow-up that's a weird so it's a something that I see every so often in our clients that really get into their world and to describe it. It sounds like that's a really good thing to do. You want to know the nuances of your world and really, I guess the way I kind of look at it is like the sandbox that you're playing in, you're the one who sets the outside barrier, boundaries, and then there are certain rules that everybody has to follow. And I think that constraints make for interesting decisions and interesting gameplay and whatnot,
Mhm.
or story. But somebody making their story for the first time, let's say I don't want to out any of our like past clients that have done this, but they get really really into the story and the background and everything for, let's say, a board game
Mhm.
that plays is a light game that plays in 30 minutes, and they have like 30 pages of narrative that they've written, and they're like very excited about the lore, and they're really excited about sharing that with other people
Right.
because they have been living in this world for a very long time, and they have all of the answers, if you will, as to why the world is what it is.
Mhm.
And this is where it gets like, I don't know, it feels so tragic because nobody cares.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I have this really cool idea and I've fleshed out this world, and like, for example, like if you were to say come to me with Crash Bandicoot,
Mhm.
um and just say this is the idea that I have, like this weird looking fox is going to run around and play and do platform and whatnot, it just wouldn't make sense. But if you if I played it, it'd be like, oh, this is actually really fun. But then if you just started telling me about the fox's world and the other things, like, I don't really have capacity as a consumer to care yet.
Yeah.
And how do you kind of bridge the gap between making something so robust and getting the actual player base to care? What is like the link to those things,
Yeah.
because so many people work so hard on their worlds,
Sure.
and
You raise a very valid point. It's the creative's jobs to understand the subtleties of the world and what's behind, outside the frame. But it's really important to also be able to do the core elements in one single image, because that's we're inundated with so much imagery in our lives and day to day. And how does that break through? So you got to understand what is the core element of this world. And for the Crash Bandicoot example, it's just a fun platforming and the self kind of referential and the goofy kind of character, right? It's that ridiculous smile that is memorable, and it's a platforming game. So later you will discover that, oh, he's who he is because he was an experiment in Neocortex's lab that went wrong. He's a rejected experiment, right? That's why he's messed up and is it's got that kind of goofiness to him. So, but it's hard to explain that right away. Once you kind of crack the door open for the person looking at it for the first time, what is it that's going to grab them, right? It has to be a moment. It has to be a core element of the gameplay. It has to be a core visual. It has to be something that kind of says, "Oh, I can see what this world may be about," and you will bring your lifetime of consumer experience to what that is. It's important to understand the genre and to be able to flip it a little bit. What is it? What's the saying in Hollywood is give me the same but different, right? So it's like you put a slight twist on it, and in terms of how is it going to stand out. It's very important to understand the core elements of your experience and what is the thing that if you have to make a movie poster, right? It has to tell what is the one image. It can't be a trailer. It can't be in a world. So no, it can't be all that. What is the one image that's going to tell me what your core premise is about? And then once you hook me in, and I can give you 30 seconds, then we say in a world and all that stuff. And then if now I got you, now if you're actually still more interested, then we get into the lore, and that lore is really important. But if it's just like you said, it's a 30-minute game, like I have to be in and out very quickly. I have to understand what my objectives are very quickly. And if you have to lay pipe, as we call it a lot of times, I got to lay a lot of pipe before I have to actually let the water flow. That's a mistake. So you got to really understand uh, what you're building and who you're building it for.
And I guess how do you sorry, I'm Sean. I'm asking all the questions here. I had this follow up about like the tutorial
hmm
and what is like absolutely essential when you put together a tutorial in a game, or whether that's a board game's first mission or a video game's in it opening tutorial. What
Yeah.
is what are your essential elements that like you must have this, and like feel free to add in like what story elements are really important
Yeah, and
as well.
tutorial is sometimes one of the last things you do because you've understood now exactly what's the core element, how you're supposed to ramp up the mastery of, because with games, you have to have the ramping up difficulty, right? So if my first movement is A, and then eventually I have to do A, B, and C, D together in order to defeat the boss, or do the amazing platforming, just like the twitch timing, grab that, jump this, and do that. Um, uh, you have to start with baby steps, right? And the fundamental thing has to be intuitive. It has to be if it requires 50 buttons to press, or if I'm not a board game creator, so I'm not going to use metaphors that I don't understand. So you have to, if it's a third person character action, for example, you would have to showcase movement. You would have to showcase picking something up and interacting with it. And then you start training me in terms of, that's why a lot of shooters have, the gauntlets you have to go through without any kind of loss possibility of damage, or taking the stress that comes to actual combat and things like that you have to do. You have to kind of master A, B, and C. What is A for me? Is it jumping? Is it shooting? Is it fighting? Is it throwing a punch? So that's what your first first time user experience has to really help me understand and start to master. And then if I have to layer in B, okay, then help me isolate B by itself if B happens to be punching or shooting, and A was traversal, as an example. First, I have to master traversal. I have to understand how to jump over things, and then I have to understand how to pick up the weapon and fire the weapon. And that also might sound very fundamental and rudimentary to you, but because you might be an advanced player, but you also want to, a lot of times, I catered the first time player experience to like my wife, who's not a gamer, and I wanted to just here play the game and tell me how it makes you. If it's somebody who is not familiar with the genre or the gaming, that's even better, because they're the people that you're trying to bring in, right? So it has to be very intuitive for them to use the controller, to understand what actions they have to do, because then they have to master that using A, B, and C at the right time, at the right cadence, in order to be successful. And if it's too difficult, then it has to be just at the right moment of challenge where the player feels like they were the one who messed up and not the game being too difficult, right? If it's the game that's constantly asking me to do things that I'm not ready for, then I'm going to lose interest, and I'm like, this game's not for me. But if it has the right amount of challenge and ramping up of difficulty, then it's a great experience. And that's the difficult thing that comes from iteration, right? You have to tweak the knobs, you have to modify the timing, you have to adjust the hit points until you kind of feel like you have the right combination. So it's more of a it's not a science, more of an art that you have to address. But that's really what it comes down to: is isolate the thing that is the core functionality, and help me understand it in a very intuitive way, and then move on to the next thing, and then ask me to start mastering it. And then I could see the trajectory is I have to be in order to get to the final boss round, or like the pinnacle of the challenge. All those things, I have to play all those notes at the same time to make Creative Symphony for myself. That's what the game is asking me. That's why we keep going back to a game, because we're like, oh, when you're playing a game and it's like 2 a.m., like I got to get to bed, and you can't wait to get back to it, because that's when you realize, okay, I can do this if I do the right combination. So that's when you know you have a great experience with the player.
So, Bob, one thing I'd like to maybe touch on that you mentioned earlier, that your start at Naughty Dog was as a concept artist, and this was sort of trading ground within the games industry to bring on concept artists. And I think another thing that Naughty Dog really developed a reputation for, I know that you had an integral part in, was this idea of cutscenes and the cinematic storytelling through game progression that sort of locks in this world. And I do know that for Jak 3, for example, you brought in animators from the film industry, not necessarily game developers. Could you maybe talk a little bit about why that was the case?
Yeah. That's reaching back, man. I guess I said that because at the time we were, the Naughty Dog arrogance probably. We were trying to set the high bar for the cinematics. It was to us, it had to be kind of feature film quality, and because of budget constraints and in terms of not being a priority for the game. I think the industry at the time was just kind of giving you flapping lips and just like a few key poses because that was acceptable and it was a secondary thought. But we really wanted to make sure that the cinematics were really high quality, and we didn't think that you would find animators who understood performance coming from the games world, right? I think that's the lines have been blurred significantly today. So there's a lot of high quality animation, but at the time we were trying to make a more cinematic, high quality experience. As an example, we wanted to do like you think about you make ground with the amount of animation you have to do with the number of seconds that you have to create per week. Like Pixar is like 3 to 4 seconds per week that they have to do. Is like really high quality stuff. They take their time. They finesse the subtle movements of it and the facial performance and so on. A lot of times, video games have to maintain up to 30 seconds a week, which means you just don't have the time to have that nice nuance. We well-meaningly started at like 5 to 10 seconds a week, and then once production hit, and we try to ramp up to 20, and animators start to make more choices of no, they're rooted, they're staying stationary, they're just we're tighter and tighter on the shot of the face instead of doing full body performance and so on. So that was just at the time we were really trying to push the quality, and we didn't think that we were looking for people who were not so much state animators, state machine animators, which is like, how do I go from the root animation from my idle to my run to a crouch to the jump to the and that's a very important understanding of the creating a state machine itself. But the performance of how I'm using my hands right now and how my face is expressing itself, those kind of things, and to bring it to actors' understanding of saying something but meaning something else. We wanted to find those people who kind of understood that and were able to give us the best performance. We were also pushing a technology at the time. Like if you look at the facial expressions of Jak and Daxter from game 1 to game 2, there's a world different. And that's because we also brought in some of the guys who have been doing some of the more groundbreaking facial animation stuff, facial performance. And again, that's now become pretty standard and well known. There's a lot of plugins you can even use, and like even with Unreal's the character builder. So it's become pretty standard stuff today, but it was really we were trying to set the priorities for ourselves in order to elevate the bar, and that only comes from when you have that support of your publisher, by the way. To have that trust, to have that mandate to push the quality is such a privilege to have been part of, and it's very rare. It's very hard to achieve.
Yeah, on those lines, I feel like any investor. So I've gone through iterations. So for Deliverance, my little intellectual property here, I had opportunities to receive investment money and other on several different occasions, and I always turned them down. Number one, I thought, if I can do this on my own, I would rather not take investors' money, because then I have someone else that has that feels like they can tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But more important than that, I felt like my vision. I felt like they needed to buy into my vision. Like you're not just buying into this intellectual property. You're buying into like my vision of the intellectual property.
Exactly.
And are you How do you deal with investors? Do they need to buy into your vision? How
Yeah, I
like
think
what
so.
extent?
First of all, I don't think I'm that successful because I'm still struggling to get stuff funded. Right now, we're pitching a game that is. We started pitching stuff that was like on par with like Uncharted and Last of Us. That was like $50 to $100 million experiences, and the only way you could do that is to have a AAA game studio that has like 100 employees. So we obviously had to work within our means. But right now, I'm pitching a title that is a uh, action puzzler, and I've gotten so far a lot of no's, which is part of the. If you look at my spreadsheet, I was going to show you my spreadsheet of all the different publishers that we're approaching. It's mostly red because a lot of them say we love it, it's great, that's beautiful prototype that you're showing us, but it's not our genre, or the action puzzle platforming is like very tough sell, or your budget is too high, or whatever it is. So there's always an excuse for why it's a no, and it's very disheartening, and it's like I said, soul sucking experience. It's if I had the answer as to what, like, if I don't have like so many publishers knocking at my door to say we must do this, that only comes from you being able to uh, create the vision yourself, to put in the prototype, make it so compelling by itself that people want a piece of it, right? So, and we're trying to do that, and at the same time, we're doing a VR port for another company that it's a great project, but a lot of times 9 out of 10 of our projects have been work for hire because of our. Let me back up a second. So the way we have been operating is that we put a prototype together, and that's expensive, right? Because it requires a lot of my team has families, so they can't just do sweat equity. They have to get paid, and that means that the only other option I have is we use our reserves, and I don't take a salary. That's why I think that was a mistake for me. But so we make a prototype, and you go and pitch it, and it has to be the right timing. It has to be the right trade show, and all the stars have to align in order for it to advance. At a certain point, it becomes like, do I even need your money anymore? Because I'm actually making success with the prototype. It's actually gaining a lot of interest, and if you're able to put it online, then I think the community is built around it. So then more people come to you. But that's a lot of investment that you have to be able to stomach and to be able to afford, because a lot of these times these things don't get to critical mass, and you have to understand that, right? So that's why it's a really risk adverse kind of a thing. So not the great answer, and not probably know what you're looking for, but it's a grind. It's a contact sport. You have to go out there. You have to make the pitch, and then a lot of times it's really rushed because it's like at GDC, I had to go from one building to another to try to find the right timing. Sometimes they're rushed. Sometimes they're not even interested. But it just takes one yes. That's why you got to keep doing it, because and right now I do have some interested parties. We haven't signed any kind of deal yet, so that's where it's just part of working on getting our current deadlines completed so we can pay the current bills, and then also at the same time work on the prototype so we can actually follow up. And the sad part is I have such a library of prototypes that we've done, because they don't achieve critical mass, and because of that, I have built this ready to launch at any moment series of prototypes for various things. So that's, I guess, the upside, if there is an upside, is that there's no shortage of ideas. It's really the execution and being able to showcase that you're able to do it cost effectively, and have that unique selling point, the USP, which is a lot of pitches require. And then that's the first thing they ask is, how is this thing going to elevate from your crowded genre?
I suppose that's the beauty of crowdfunding, because you almost remove the need for the investor, and
Exactly.
the customer then actually becomes part of the development process, because you can work with the end user to actually modify the game and the world. And Andrew, you were able to do that with Deliverance. And I think that's a great model to for the listeners to consider, is the crowdfunding model, because you can sort of maintain your vision and also satisfy similar fans who are also interested in this genre of game or this type of world. So, Bob, in recent history, has there been any projects you've worked on that sort of stood out as something that you've particularly enjoyed? Any type of like favorite project maybe that you have worked on?
Oh my goodness, where to start? So I'm looking at my website now to remind me, and unfortunately, like I love every one of them, right? They're all my children, and if I would really want them to uh, uh, come to market, eventually be released. So from various concepts that we worked on. Um, if you go to my website, for example, it's under concepts. Those are the ones that were projects that we were pitching but didn't get off the ground, right? So there's a big cinematic title called Bloodlines, which was about a Cold War conspiracy thriller set between the 60s and 80s. Well, we actually poured so much of our reserves into it. And the idea was that this character from the 80s, so a lot of nostalgia. I know one of your questions was about nostalgia. Um, this character from the 80s is running away from his past of his dad being associated with the JFK assassination. And the concept was how does the player take the current clues? If this character, his whole thing is about, he's able to decipher clues in the space and to kind of repurpose the past. So he's a great detective in that way, and he's kind of finding out the lore that was part of his dad being connected to the JFK assassination. So we're looking at the player has to choose the various things that are important in the play space, and that means that he can reconstruct the past. But the kind of things that you select also would cater to how the past is playing out. So it's not a time travel game, but you're kind of reconstructing the past, and the player is able to look at how the choices made in the present, it reflects the past, reflects the present, right? And the prototype for that was very alluring. The world fiction was very strong. And the publisher just kept saying, "We love it. So show us more combat. We love it. Show us more gunplay. We love it. Show us more." I was like, you know what? This is like I put all of our freaking reserves into it, and at some point, it's like I can't do it anymore. To get back to your question in terms of you know what projects have I worked on that I was really interested in, I would say every project. They all have their own special place in your heart, and we do our best to try to get them off the ground with getting publisher interest. But there's sadly there's a whole bunch of my orphan children that are on my website that have a very special place in my heart. I love the creative process, and that's really the difficult part to try to get people to understand why this thing is so special and so exciting. And a lot of times, it's really the what has happened is that we get the work for hire opportunities, right? And that's what has kept us going for the past 15 years. We brought in about 42 million in work for hire contracts, and occasionally we get lucky. And for example, Google was doing launching the Daydream, the VR platform, and they wanted content for launch, and we happened to have a project that we were pitching called Arcslinger. So that was the one of the success stories for us of fairly small budget, but something that they wanted to do. In a 6-month development cycle, which is nothing, we're able to put this very fun game where it actually has voice acting from Nolan North and Roger, who's the voice of Sonic. A lot of people that I worked with in the past who came together, and we had a lot of fun doing it. So it's just we just need that one opportunity to be given to you to really prove the case. And we also like we're doing a VR title for Fox Next for the Kingsman. So really got into the lore of the project. A lot of writing that was necessary, but Matthew Vaughn, the movie director, liked it so much that it became canon. So it became like the backup plan for Valentine, the villain from the first movie, Samuel Jackson's character. We had a tremendous amount of fun working on it, but it was a bit of a challenge because there was feature creep in that. Our publishing partners came more from movies at the time, and the very classic example of feature creep in that every prototype was promising. And it's like, what if we do this, right? And that's the thing that'll kill it. So I had to constantly say, like, look, we gotta, these are the things that's gonna make it very difficult to deliver on time, because we have to maintain our schedule. So ultimately, the project, a lot of these projects were canceled. Unfortunately, they did not see the light of day because of various reasons that are outside of our control. In this case, I think Fox Next was bought by Disney or whoever it was. We also did a project that, I'll be breaking NDAs, but it was it's a very well-known IP that is actually now in film format, episodic format as well. And because of our work with geolocation with Pokemon Go, we became one of the go-to shops for doing prototyping for geolocation on mobile. And we developed a suite of tools that we call Tapestry. That was a collection of know-how and tool sets, and then everything else that allows us to prop up geolocation on your phone using map data. So, for example, like you could take Google Maps and Mapbox, which are third-party map tools that are basically like the roads and buildings in your phone is just geometry, right? So it's splines and geometry. So we're able to put proprietary shaders and reskin the world to this IP's vision, which was amazing, and it was one of their highest internally rated projects. But then all of a sudden they canceled it. It was a gut punch. Like, what? Why? And it was because of an acquisition. You can probably connect the dots and figure out what it is because of the recent acquisitions. But and then COVID happened, and geolocation was falling out of favor and was very risk averse kind of a thing. And then when you have a new overlord, they're not as interested in mobile or geolocation, so just cut it, right? And even though it was their highest internally rated reviewed project, it was still cut. So I've had a series of scars because of that, and a lot of times I wake up the next day, I'm like, why am I doing this? And it's because I fucking love it, and there's nothing else I can do. That's really
Yeah. I think that the grind is so important. I mean, I find even for myself, playing at a lower level with board games, the release, now that I've been through, I had a very successful first Kickstarter, and that was a real high. And then to find out, I raised $314,000 on Kickstarter, and then we sold through all our stock. So it was about $1.5 million that we made on our first print run and everything, and not bad for a little side gig. And then it was like, but wait, I realized I thought I climbed the Lonely Mountain, but it turns out that I climbed like a tiny little hill, and the Lonely Mountain is like in the fog, way in the distance behind other mountains. It's like, oh my goodness, yeah. So, and then I with the next Kickstarter, we launched one in September of last year, and we made $500,000 on that one, and earned a lot more backers and whatnot, and it's growing. But it's like, wow, this is I can't just press a magic button and then have it explode, and it's just a challenging uphill battle. And so what I've kind of decided for myself is that the journey is the reward for me, even though, I'll be on Netflix one day, you'll look at me and be like, wow, that guy, I remember when he was just on episode 230, whatever, of his podcast. But it really is something, I think, that without the just simple enjoyment of like what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot that just feels hollow, especially during those moments of failure. Would you agree? Or
creative that's a professional who's making some money is such a privilege. I mean, it's just so many people want to be in this position of being able to work on a creative thing and get paid for it. So the fact that you're actually you're surviving is a huge achievement in itself. Sure, we all wanted to have like our product come out there and be a massive success and to be rewarded for it. We all want all artists want love. They want to know that they do good work and they be praised for it. But just by being able to continue, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You become better at your craft. You kind of understand how to adjust it. So that in itself is a massive reward. And a lot of times we have to set aside our ego and expectations and look at the optimistic side, which is, we're still here. So how do we learn from this experience and do something that we feel is threads all those needles together? Because that's what you need, is like just A lot of times you might be blind to something, or it just might come to you later. But there's always a solution for it, or it just might be time to set it aside and think of the next one. And that's a difficult thing too. Like how has your pitch run its full course? That's now time to seriously think about something else. So there's no hard and fast rule to it, and it's just something that you have to work through yourself personally.
Yeah. I'm reminded of Magic the Gathering was created by Richard Garfield as sort of for fun. He was tasked to produce a board game of some kind, and he did, and then he just had this backup prototype had been fiddling with. They're like, "Oh, what's that?" And that became Magic the Gathering, this massive, massive IP. So sometimes those things that you work on and set down for a little while.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is how do you separate your passion project from I have to do this to survive. And that's the hardest thing, separation, because you start to make some choices that are not part of your original DNA, because you're like, this is my, like, the stress of having to make it work, or like you said, if you have an investor, they have different ideas about what it should be, and that's what makes it very difficult to navigate that. The game development is it's a social process. You have to work with other disciplines, and then you have also the people who are funding it, who have their own ideas, who have their own data. They have their own pressures to deal with. They also have to answer to their shareholders, and so on. So it's a very high risk thing, and there has to be that the main glue for that success is the trust, right? If they trust you, they will work with you. If they feel like you don't have their best interest in mind, or you're not being completely candid with them, then the trust is not there, and then the glue kind of falls apart.
So, Bob, we've covered quite a lot of topics here. We're probably coming to an end. A lot of people listening will be publishers, either they're hoping to go to Kickstarter with a video game or a tabletop game. Would your agency, Big Red Button, ever consider taking on clients in the tabletop space for art direction services?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a new territory for us. We've never done something like that, but the creative process is the same. If you work with a partner who understands what the parameters are, I'm sure we can be creative and be successful within that category. Because, like I said, I'm the visual and creative behind the company, and that means that as long as you tell me what the parameters are, I'm sure we can work within that. And to be able to reduce the risk factor by having to create, video games are a lot more expensive because you have to create all this technology, and you have to have all these different disciplines. To me, it seems like maybe I'm naive, but I think the board game would go to the essence of design and the visual, right? There is no technology in terms of there's no programming, there's no coding. So basically, we cut out that risk factor, and we can really just focus on the visual elements, which is my bread and butter, and then the design factor, like what is the compulsion loop for the player, what's the world's economy, all those things that I would work with a designer to help understand, and then we kind of work together. And that's the fun part for me, is to work with somebody else who is more experienced than I am in their field, whether it's writing or design or whatever it might be. And then we can that becomes the best synergy for creativity. Is how do I give you a visual solution that enhances your design principles, right? So that's the creative process that I really enjoy. So absolutely, I'm totally open to it. And as for myself, like, I remember my childhood experience of talked about this a little bit before, like playing Bard's Tale or playing Dark Tower was a fantastic game that we were just super impressed, because it was it had some technology element, but with the timing of that board, and you had to cross the map, and the map was so the dark forest, mysterious swamps, and things like that. It just got my imagination going. So I think you just need a vehicle that helps the player understand that, and it's part of the same. It's cut from the same cloth of creativity and world design. So all those things, I'm sure, apply. So it sounds like a fun challenge that I would totally open to it.
That's awesome. Well, Bob, we really appreciate your time and
Thank you.
that all of the knowledge that you shared. It's been really incredible. So your website is brbent.com. That's like Big Red Button Entertainment. Right. BRBENT.
Yeah, that's our website. My personal website is bobrafei.com, BOBRAFEI.com. Okay. And that has it's basically a place for me to capture the 30 years or so of my work as a kind of repository before I had get hit by a bus and I'm no longer on this planet. Something that my kids can look at and occasionally get the occasional email from. But yeah, that's basically it's all there. There's a lot of stuff that isn't there. That's hidden behind the vault area, which is only for some people who are looking to work with me and they need to see more under the hood, for example. But sadly, there's there's a lot of projects that are in my heart, but haven't quite seen the time of day. But that's why I'm still very optimistic about the future. It's just a matter of finding the right partners and the right time. And I'm super stoked about the possibilities.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. We're going to have Robot Richard send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy.